Have you ever had a really bad day? Maybe you even said, I feel like I was hit by a truck. I felt hit by a truck one day, and it's amazing. Every single person who I have spoken to who's experienced something severe and traumatic, they always know the day. Everybody knows the day that it happened. And for me, that day was March 1st, 2014. I was hit by a 15-ton semi-truck going 65 miles an hour. I wasn't in a vehicle when it hit my body. So let's go back. I owned a company for about 15 years called Let's Pretend Entertainment. February 28th, 2014, I left my home in Puyallup to travel to the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. We pulled out of my driveway in my Ford F-250, pulling a 16-foot dual-axle trailer behind us, headed for Houston. Now, this is the end of February, so I'm watching the weather, and it was predicted that a large storm was going to be blowing into the region. That's okay. I've driven in all kinds of bad weather. I'm a Pacific Northwest girl. I grew up skiing, driving in the mountains. I summited Mount Rainier for my 40th birthday. I'm tough, no problem. We'll drive through the night and make up some time. We arrived in Denver, Colorado, spent the night, celebrated our long nonstop trip from Puyallup to Denver. Got up the next morning and headed out. Right about Lyman, Colorado, just east of Denver, the weather turned bad. It was snowing a lot and icy. I sent my husband text messages, not while I was driving. We stopped at a truck stop to change wiper blades and take care of business. I sent my husband these text messages while we were stopped. Roads are icy. Better me in control if things go sideways. True, he said, but don't go sideways. Not planning to. Smiley face. So we left Lyman, continued east, pulled into Wichita, Kansas at about 7 p.m. And by this point, of course, it's dark. We stopped to pick up a new employee. Her name is Joy. While Joy and Mo were throwing the bags into the truck, I had a phone call with my dad. Ring, ring. Or more accurately with cell phones these days, ring, ring. That was the last time I talked to my dad for 7 weeks. We ended that call the way we always do. He said, "You be safe." And I said what I always say, always am, Dad. So we turned out onto the highway, headed south out of Wichita, headed towards a Holiday Inn Express in Denton, Texas, where I had reserved a room for the night. I was looking forward to biscuits. It was snowing. About an hour south of Wichita, all of a sudden, my trailer swung out hard to the left. And I did what anybody who pulls trailers knows to do. I slammed on the brakes. No, of course not. No. I steered into it, tried to pull that trailer back behind me. But I-35 is a 2-lane highway. 2 lanes going south, 2 lanes going north, with a big grassy median in the middle. When I steered into the slide, the trailer swung back hard the other direction, and we slammed into the guardrail with the front driver's side corner of my truck, slammed into the guardrail, immovable. I slammed that truck into drive and reverse, punching the gas as hard as I could. I would drive over that guardrail if I had to, and nothing moved. Have you ever had that experience where you will do absolutely anything and everything you can? You're giving it all you got, and it doesn't make a difference. It's not going to change. And you have to deal with what comes next. The headlights of a semi were coming at us fast, and I knew it was going to hit us in seconds. I turned to Mo and Joy and I said, "Get out now and run as fast as you can." And they looked at me and they said, "Get out." I said, "Yes, get out now, run." Run on the highway side. For me, safety was about 6 feet away. The back doors of a Ford F-250 has suicide doors, which means the person sitting in the back seat has to have somebody let them out. Joy, who I had just hired, met her for the first time in Wichita because I had hired her over Skype, virtually, like we're doing so much of now. Joy was in the back seat, and I was terrified that if Mo didn't let her out of the truck, Joy would be trapped. I had a choice to make. I could run and protect myself, or I could stay and make sure that Joy was going to get out safely. What would you do? Mo jumped out. She opened the door for Joy. She slipped and fell on the ice. Joy got out. We were hit by a semi that pulled hard to the right, spun things around. Mo rolled over on the ice, looking up at the undercarriage of an F-250 sliding over her with tires on both sides. She scrambles out to the side. Joy makes it out to the side with her, and they're both alive and well today. A Toyota Sequoia SUV with a family of 4 skidded into the back end of my truck, separating the truck and trailer and sending those spinning. Somewhere in the midst of all of that chaos is when I jumped out, and by this point, I'm now closer to the middle of the highway, and I start running. And then it happened. A semi-truck going 65 miles an hour. The driver had put it in cruise control, never touched the brakes, and he hit my body on the run. I was thrown 90 feet and impaled on the cable guardrail in the center median of the highway. Still conscious. My almost last words on the planet. I cannot record in video, but could you blame me? When life hits you like a truck, that's when you get to learn who you really are. We are not defined by our circumstances, we're defined by our character. In my company, we operated on what I call living 5 rules. And I'd like to share those with you today, because those 5 rules became the guiding principles that defined the character that I had and everybody in my organization had. Later, while I was on life support machines, my company continued to operate and fulfill all of the contracts that we had in place, spanning the entire western half of the United States and all the way up into Alaska. I could not be more proud of my people. How's your team doing? How are you? These are tough times. I arrived at the emergency room with eyes fixed and dilated, no pulse, not breathing on my own. I had broken left hand, broken ribs, punctured diaphragm, lacerated left kidney, collapsed left lung. My stomach was up where my lung was supposed to be. Had a traumatic brain injury, broken left leg, and none of that was the bad news. My pelvis had been folded in half, like a book. Well, it's actually called an open book fracture. And I had an open book fracture of the severity that, if you look it up, it just simply says that patients bleed out, they die. And yet, here I am. How's your faith that things will work out? My pelvis was completely shattered. The left iliac crest, the left side of the pelvis, was in 4 pieces, not attached to anything else, and my tailbone was what the surgeon simply described as mush. This is my pelvis. Not a line you normally hear a speaker say. I spent 7 weeks in the surgical ICU unit in Wichita. Shortly after I had first arrived there, my husband and my mother were able to fly into Wichita. My husband first. He arrived on the last seat available, of the last flight available that they allowed into the airport before they shut it down. Astounding. My mother is a retired physician, family physician, so when she heard all of the news, she was certain that her firstborn child was gone. I love to prove my mother wrong. Rule number 1 of Living 5 Rules. Rule number 1. It's not about you. Now that means, obviously, being of service. That we take care of other people and we be of service. And right about this point, you're listening to me thinking, are you kidding me? That's all I've done. I have been of service through this whole thing over and over because that is what the professionals do. You're a pro. And you will put others first. Of course you do. In the context of resilience, it's not about you also means nobody's picking on you personally. That's why you see over and over, we're all in this together. When it's not about you and you put others first, it gets you out of your own head and out of your own way. That's why we take care of other people, besides the obvious fact that it's the right thing to do. It's the good thing to do. We also do it because it's the right thing to do for ourselves. That's the kind of world that we want to live in. About 3 weeks into my ICU stay, I was raced once again into another emergency surgery. I had developed sepsis, all over body blood infection that is very often deadly. They had to amputate all of the gluteal muscles on the left side. Yep, gluteus, maximus, minimus, medius, it's all gone. That makes me a half-assed speaker. when I came out of the coma and the nurse leans into me, she says, "Elisa, would you like something to drink?" Because I'd been intubated on a ventilator. So I turned to the nurse. I said, "Yeah. Can I have a beer?" Okay, so why did I do that? I mean, besides the fact that I really do love a good beer. And someday when all the social distancing thing is done, we can get together and have a beer. Why did I do that? I did it because I saw the pain on the faces of my husband and my mother, and I wanted to lighten the load. So I told a joke. I got a laugh. Sometimes when it's not about you, what you've got to do is get a laugh. Rule number 2 of Living 5 Rules. You have to actually care. Remember I said my company was called Let's Pretend Entertainment? Part of what I used to tell my team is you have to actually care, no pretending allowed. That means we operate from the heart. I work with teams, leaders, organizations on building empathy-fueled culture. Empathy-fueled culture is one where people listen, really, actually listen, and open their hearts to pay attention to what's going on really with another person, especially at times of extreme stress. It becomes so easy to get task focused and not person focused. Your job is not a task. Your job is a person. Always. So as you are slammed trying to solve problems, and by the time you're watching this video, I have no idea what those problems are going to be, because let's be honest, it is changing on a day-to-day basis. But I do know that no matter what, your job is always a person. Embrace and model to everyone on your team that your job is not a task, your job is a person. You'll build a culture where people actually care about customers, actually care about clients, and actually care about each other. Okay, where was I in my story? After about a month and a half in the ICU, I was stable enough to fly back to Seattle, except you couldn't load me onto Delta Airlines. I was still on all sorts of life support machines. And I had a trach. One of my great gifts, I scar well. I had a trach here, so there was that. I had to be sent on a medical Learjet. No problem. It was just a $30,000 flight. So what are we going to do? Well, at the insistence of friends who actually care, friends from all around North America, they raised over $54,000 in less than 2 weeks to fly me from Wichita back to Seattle. That's when I saw my dad for the first time. That day in 2014. That day just happened to be Good Friday. On Friday the 13th of June, 2014, I made it home. I started bawling. I made it. I made it. And everybody thinks that's when the story ends. See, you survive the acute trauma. And everybody thinks that's where the story ends. But as you are now discovering, in work, in life, that's where the story really begins. That's where the hard work really begins. I remember laying in my bed at home. I still had tubes coming out of my body. I was on what I fondly referred to as medical house arrest. They called it home health care. That sounds nicer. I remember laying in my bedroom looking out the window, feeling isolated, feeling alone, wondering what in the world has happened to my life, thinking, I no longer do the work I used to do. I can't. So what do you do when you feel lost? Ask for directions, obviously. Rule number 3, ask more, tell less. Have you noticed how much people will talk at you? We've all been reading a lot of the news and watching the media, and my gosh, is that a non-stop onslaught of talking at you. It's exhausting. Do you know what's helpful? Asking questions. Asking questions builds relationships. It gives you more information. Asking better questions gives you better answers. My kidneys failed completely because of, getting slammed by a semi-truck. I had what they call rhabdomyolysis, which is the big fancy medical term for giant globs of proteins that clogged up my kidneys. Here's your PSA, take good care of your kidneys. Turns out they control just about everything in your body. So my kidneys failed completely. I was on dialysis. I had a chest catheter coming out right here, tubes that were my dialysis port. And the doctors kept saying, your kidneys are going to come back. They'll come back. Well, they'll probably come back. We think they'll come back. Yeah, Elisa. Yeah, they're not going to come back. That's where we ended up after about 6 months of that. In the meantime, I kept getting dialysis like any dialysis patient would do, and I kept doing what the experts told me to do, the doctors. I didn't ask enough questions until it came right up against my vanity. Yeah, my ego. See, when they told me that my kidneys weren't coming back, then they wanted to put a fistula in my arm. Trying to do the camera. Fistula is the medical term where they stitch together an artery and a vein so that they can permanently have a dialysis port there. And I said, oh, whoa. No, we're not going to go messing up with my beautiful, beautiful tattoo right here. If you can see there, because that tattoo is how my body was identified in the ambulance. Nothing else was identifiable. So we weren't going to mess with that. And at that point, I started asking more questions. I started asking, well, wait a minute. I don't have an underlying illness. I don't have diabetes. I don't have all of these other reasons that are causes for people to have dialysis, diabetes being the biggest one of them. So could I control my kidney function, my numbers, with my diet? Could I do that? And what would that look like? What would that take? I was doing exactly the opposite of what they wanted me to do, really. But I kept asking questions, less telling, more asking. Kept asking questions till I found my way to a doctor who agreed with me, who liked my gumption, my stubbornness, because sometimes being really resilient means you just have to be stubborn. Stubborn fortitude is not a bad thing. You have to just commit to the grit. Which takes me to rule 4. Do the hard thing. That's right. Do the hard thing. Whatever the issue is at hand, this is what I used to tell my kids. We called this mom's moral maxim. Whatever it is, the hard thing is probably the right thing. So do the hard thing. I controlled my dialysis numbers, or not my dialysis numbers, my kidney function numbers through dietary controls. Now, when your kidneys don't work, that's a problem, because if you have too much potassium, you'll have a sudden heart attack in your sleep and die. If you have too much protein, your kidneys can't process it, you'll die. Too much phosphates, you'll die. So basically, I lived on rice and apple slices. There wasn't a lot I could eat. And that's really a problem because I love nachos. Yes, because they go with beer, obviously. What's the deal with nachos? Okay, nachos, when you have kidney failure, looks like this. None of the good stuff, you pretty much have corn chips. And my brother understood that this was a deal breaker for me in life. I mean, no nachos, that's just a deal breaker, right? So he said, I'll give you a kidney. That's why I tell my children, be really, really nice to your siblings. You never know, you might need a kidney someday. We went to University of Washington, jumped through all of the hoops. The amount of testing involved with getting a kidney and giving a kidney is enormous. But turns out my brother is a great match. He's 6'3", I think. And he's 12 years younger, which basically means I got a kidney upgrade. Except one day in July, I had just flown back from a conference in Washington, D.C. We were at the end of all of our testing with the University of Washington, and I knew we were going to be scheduling surgery any day we were going to be scheduling surgery. I told total strangers on the airplane all around me, I said, I'm getting a kidney. Yeah, my brother's going to give me a kidney. I'm going to go home, and then I'll get a call from University of Washington, and we're going to schedule surgery because my brother's giving me a kidney. Hey, have you heard my brother's giving me a kidney? And then my brother showed up at my house on a bright sunny day in the middle of the workday. And he doesn't live that close. So I thought, that's weird. We sat out on my back deck. He said, Elisa, University of Washington called. They're taking a pass. They won't do it. Gut punch. Remember, I no longer even had a dialysis port. Like playing poker, I just went all in. See, it turns out that, well, what we already know, I am a complex, what they call polytrauma patient, and all of this in the middle, everything there is all carved up like a Christmas ham and so much scar tissue, nothing shows up on imaging. And that wasn't really the biggest problem. The biggest problem is that my brother is a freak. Well, I mean, he's a fun freak, but he has 3 arteries to his left kidney and 4 to his right kidney instead of just the usual 1. Talk about being an overachiever. And that exceeded the risk profiles that University of Washington was willing to take on. we had ourselves a little cry. And my husband said, well, honey, of course it's not going to be easy. That doesn't make a good story. Do the hard thing. It's going to be a better story. We looked around, made a lot of phone calls, called Mayo Clinic because they're Mayo Clinic, called the University of California, San Francisco because they're the highest volume transplant center in the country. And we called the University of Maryland Medical Center in Baltimore because my brother saw on their website a post about doing multiple artery kidney transplants. Within a week, because we asked and kept asking, within a week, we were booking flights to Baltimore. So me, my brother, our spouses, and our dad all flew to Baltimore, stayed in an apartment there for a month. I woke up out of a surgery, said, do I have a kidney? My husband looked at me and said, yeah. It worked. Rule number 5. Play the long game. You can't give up. Play the long game. That's what will get you there. It was 18 months to the day that I got my kidney transplant after I was hit by a truck. They estimate the time to develop a vaccine to be about 12 to 18 months. We all feel hit by a truck. But if we play the long game, do the hard thing, ask more, tell less, actually care, and remember, it's really not about you, then we will all get through this together. So if you haven't already ordered your copy, you received the link and a coupon code. That is a special gift just for the attendees of the South Sound Business Summit, and that coupon will expire when the summit expires on August 1st. All it costs you is the shipping. In the back of the book, you'll find Living 5 Rules posted right there. Please reach out to me if I can answer any questions or be of any service to you. I look forward to being in touch.
When we wake, hear the birds and see the sun. Side by side our fears are done. Oh, the good times just begun. We know what we have, let's hold on tight. Found what we're looking for in life. Call us crazy, but things are finally right. With you and I, the future is bright. Sleep, hear the crickets, see the moon. Side by side and through. No limit to what we can do. Oh, we know what we have, let's hold on tight. Found what we're looking for in life. as crazy, but things are finally right. With you and I, the future is bright.